No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, the quiet acceptance of the horrific killing of 87-year-old Thomas O'Halloran in his mobility scooter is an indictment on the state of policing. We absolutely should be fighting back hard against the crime epidemic sweeping the country.
They've got it.
So tonight, I implore the authorities to stop serving the woke mob as Orwellian-style thought police and protect us from violent criminals. That's in my digest next. Then I'll get the thoughts of my superstar panel, top Daily Mail columnist Sarah Vine, Conservative commentator Dominique Samuelson, author and broadcaster Amy Nicole. At 9:40, former Shadow Health Secretary Anne Widdecombe delivers expert advice to the new PM on how to combat spiralling crime. Plus, what shocking excuse did Sadiq Khan give for the lawlessness in London?
Afraid this summer we are seeing what we feared, which is an increase in violent crime as there are longer daylight hours, school holidays, a heat wave and so forth.
Oh yeah, it's all down to the weather. The failed mayor has got to be a strong contender to be named my final union jackass of the week. Find out at 10:50. As train strikes again cause havoc across the UK and Mick Lynch ramps up his politically motivated attacks on the Tory government.
Grant Shapps seems fairly desperate. What I think you're seeing is a man who's worried about his future. He's got to try and flex his right-wing muscles in front of a parade of two really right-wing people that are going to be his boss.
So will Transport Secretary Grant Shapps' Thatcher-inspired 16-point action plan finally free Britain from the grip of the unions? That's our big debate at 10. Will leadership frontrunner Liz Truss be able to deliver opportunity equality across the UK? Well, levelling up Minister Paul Scully explains why he's backing her for PM and gives his verdict on Graftgate. That's at 10:15. A date has been set for when the new Omicron targeting vaccine will be rolled out to the first of the 25 million eligible Brits. But with Tony Blair pushing for all adults to get jabbed, do you even want another COVID booster? I know I don't, but I'm very intrigued by how you'll answer. I'll give you details on how to get in touch in just a moment. Then Rebel King's College anaesthetist Dr. Steve James, Professor of Oncology at St George's Dr. Angus Dalgleish, GP Dr. David Lloyd and commentator Nina Mishkov go head-to-head in the clash at 9:25. Amid fears a cashless society could allow governments to take our money, is Liz Truss right to vow to protect notes and coins? Social media sensation Zuby, he's investigating this phenomenon and he will be uncancelled at 10:40. And as Brits insist they don't want classic movies and TV shows censored, why are Liberals now the new Puritans destroying the entertainment industry?
While you kiss me, I will make the balls go click in the bucket.
Hello, star Vicky Michelle, which now comes with a trigger warning, believe it or not, leads the resistance against woke and celebrates the classic sitcom's 40th anniversary in The Outsider at 9:50. It's A-level results day, of course, and with more disadvantaged kids set to attend university than pre-COVID, is it right to prioritise poorer students and our white working-class boys still being left behind thanks to privileged propaganda? And would you like lies with that? How has this latest attempt at relatability backfired on multi-millionaire and alleged McDonald's fan Rishi Sunak?
Brown, no hash brown.
So I didn't yesterday, but if I'm with my daughters, then we get the wrap.
Oh, the girls like the
My
wrap.
eldest daughter is, or we get the wraps. If I'm with her, that wrap with the hash brown and everything in it is what we do.
Girl after my own heart.
That, I mean, she's.
Oh, do you really, Rishi? I'll reveal all about that and take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers and the media buzz. That's throughout the 10 hour. This is Dan Wootton Tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though, and I do hope you'll let me be just a little self-indulgent for a few seconds to bring you news about GBNews. We've been on air over a year now and we have secured a second phase of investment as our family of viewers grows by the day, thanks to you switching off the British bashing corporation and Sly News and spreading the word about GBN. And 3 exciting new hires will be adding to our stellar lineup of shows from later this year. Star Daily Telegraph columnist Camilla Tominey joins in a new senior political presenting role. Star Daily Mail columnist Andrew Pearce joins with his own show. And the legendary Tory former cabinet minister and a superstar panellist here on this show every now and then, Michael Portillo, will launch his own programme in the autumn. Once again, thank you for your ongoing support of our little underdog channel. And just never forget, they said we would be dead within a year. My digest on lawless Britain in just a moment. Then my superstar panel weigh in. Tonight, the Star Daily Mail columnist Sarah Vine, the political commentator Dominique Samuels, and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicole. But before all of that, the news with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Dan. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. The A-level results are in, and the number of top grades awarded to students in England, Wales and Northern Ireland has fallen for the first time since 2021. Despite that, they do remain higher than pre-pandemic levels. UCAS revealed that the number of students accepted at universities and colleges has also dropped. Union bosses say strike action will continue until a settlement is reached. More than 40,000 rail workers walked out today and will again on Saturday in a dispute over pay and conditions. Public transport in London will also be affected by industrial action tomorrow. Almost 1,000 Albanian criminals and immigration offenders have been deported from the UK so far this year. That's according to the latest Home Office figures. Those removed on recent flights include offenders convicted of rape, sexual offences involving children, kidnap and serious assault. The Home Secretary says the latest figures should serve as a warning to all foreign national offenders that the government will try to remove them. Police are searching a house in connection with the stabbing of an 87-year-old man in West London. Officers carrying forensic equipment were seen entering the property earlier. Thomas O'Halloran was riding his mobility scooter when the incident occurred on Tuesday. Detectives say a 44-year-old man has been detained in relation to the killing. He was arrested at an address in Southall in the early hours of this morning. Greater Manchester Police have released a third image of a man they wish to speak to in connection with a sexual assault on a 6-year-old girl. The child was taken into a wooded area in Droylsden at around 4 p.m. yesterday, and then to a van where she was attacked. She was reunited with her family shortly after and is receiving specialist support. Parents are being warned to be extra vigilant with their children. And the man accused of stabbing novelist Salman Rushdie in New York has pled not guilty to charges of second-degree attempted murder and assault. 24-year-old Hadi Matar is accused of wounding the 75-year-old just before he was about to deliver a lecture. Rushdie sustained severe injuries, including nerve damage in his arm, wounds to his liver, and he also could lose an eye. The attack came 33 years after a fatwa was issued against Mr. Rushdie over the publication of his book, The Satanic Verses. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Back now to Dan.
I don't know about you, but I haven't been able to stop thinking of Thomas O'Halloran all day. I haven't been able to stop thinking about what the brutal killing of this 87-year-old beloved grandfather on his mobility scooter from which he raised money for victims of the Ukraine war means for British society. This is the sort of heinous crime that in years gone by would have stopped the nation and united politicians across the political spectrum in horror. But in this current climate, it feels to me there's almost a quiet acceptance. It's just another horrific killing as the woke police lose control of Sadiq Khan's lawless London. But we can't quietly accept the epidemic of crime sweeping from London across the rest of Britain. After all, the shocking and unprovoked attack on Mr. O'Halloran was London's 6th slaying in just 4 days. Meanwhile, according to police statistics, violent crime offences in England and Wales have skyrocketed from just over 601,000 in the year 2012-2013, to 2.1 million in the year ending March 2022. Thanks to social media, we see the crimes being committed on a daily basis as the criminals go about their dastardly business, seemingly without a care in the world.
Okay, something serious. Yeah, we need to go back now.
This horrifying increase of violent crime offences by 1.5 million in a decade should be seen as a damning indictment of the state of policing in this country. Its coppers focus on serving the woke mob as Orwellian-style thought police instead of fighting violent crime. Failed London Mayor Sadiq Khan has set the tone, caring more about pathetic virtue signalling over green extremism, taking the knee, patrolling lockdown and diversity quotas rather than the safety of Londoners. That's even as knife crime runs rife. Of course, he's blamed the cost of living crisis, the school holidays and even the weather for this latest crime wave.
Afraid this summer we are seeing what we feared, which is an increase in violent crime as there are longer daylight hours, school holidays, heat wave and so forth. We are working with the police to suppress that violence.
That is pathetic. As former Conservative leader Sir Ian Duncan Smith, a Liz Truss supporter, said, London is inundated with crime at the moment, and apart from putting out statements, Sadiq Khan has done next to nothing on this. We have gang warfare on the streets of London and some boroughs, yet Mr Khan's priorities seem to be elsewhere. He needs to make this his number one priority and focus on getting rid of these gangs. Many constituents cannot see the point in him. Now, as regular viewers know, I am very engaged in this subject personally, having been mugged 3 times while walking the streets of the city I love in the past 3 years. And I was one of the lucky ones, uninjured. The gangs of thugs on mopeds and the little hood rats on bikes just wanted my phone. And they know there'll be so little consequence. Now, theft has effectively been decriminalised, with just a tiny proportion of burglaries and muggings now leading to prosecution. But Thomas O'Halloran wasn't so lucky. Next time I might not be. Or your mother, brother, boyfriend, husband, wife. So as a society, the onus is on us now to demand the new Prime Minister to start making law and order a top priority from next month. Yes, the police were wrongly starved of resources by Theresa May, and we're now playing catch-up. But this is largely a matter of what's seen as important. And when it comes to our police, it must be stopping violent crime rather than pursuing internet trolls and futile historic allegations by fantasists. Mayor Khan should stop trying to decriminalise drugs by going on jollies to California and stop the murders taking place on the streets he promised to protect. But to respond now, my superstar panel, Daily Mail columnist Sarah Vine, the political commentator Dominique Samuels, and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicol. And Sarah, I was so struck last night because it was really only the Daily Mail that put this crime on the front page as the story that we should be talking about. And I think that was great that the Mail did that. But a lot of the media seem to almost just shrug their shoulders. Oh, another murder, another
because
murder.
The problem is they know that the answer to this problem is to have more police on the streets with more powers, and the other newspapers are just too woke to say that, because they're the ones who are partly responsible for the police not having any powers, because they're the ones who have campaigned for them to be taken away from them successfully under Theresa May, who was a disaster in 27,000 different ways, but also in that way. And, you know, the Mail is often accused of being, you know, too hard line on all this stuff. But the truth is, you know, it's clear just from that footage you showed that people are not frightened of the police anymore. They're not, you know, that's where, you know, a safe society starts, with people being concerned that if they do something wrong, there will be consequences. And they're like naughty children. They've never had any consequences for their actions. They know that the grown-ups are not going to properly discipline them. They know they can't probably go to jail because A, the jails are full, and B, the criminal courts are full. And even if they do get there, they'll probably be out in a month because the sentences are so lenient. So they just think, well, let's just have a go and see what happens. Probably be okay.
But then that's more the problem, surely. Numbers. There aren't enough numbers of police. And I think that when you say everyone feels like naughty children, it's like, well, if people had respect and then they were punished accordingly, that comes from what you're... I think you're conflating two things, because you can have this whole woke police force, because I think that's a good thing if they're in communities and they get along with everyone, because that earns the trust. But then it's the numbers. We just do not have the funding.
Do you think it's a good thing, by the way, when they're doing the YMCA dances, when they're partying with Extinction Rebellion protesters, when they're taking the knee at violent BLM marches? Is that a good thing, the woke police? That's a good thing.
That surely is a good thing, because you're earning a place in the community and you're...
But that's not how you earn a place.
But you're building trust.
But Amy, that's not how you earn your place in the community. You don't earn your place in the community by behaving like an idiot to try and get people to like you.
And laugh at you.
And laugh at you. Because everybody, by the way, is laughing at the police.
Yeah, they are.
And
they don't respect
Carnival.
it.
They're not going, oh, I respect you because you're doing a dance. I think, oh, what an idiot. I think that's the case anyway. What you do is you build a relationship by being fair and by talking to community leaders, which is what the police have always done. There are always good people in communities who will help the police and who will work with them. It's just that the police just don't have any presence. There are plenty of policemen, actually. They're just not on the streets. They're in offices filling in forms, which is absurd.
Yeah, and the priorities have clearly changed.
Yeah, they have changed.
And what a surprise. Crime has skyrocketed as a result.
Exactly. I mean, we could talk about lack of police officers, lack of funding, and I think that does have a role to play, especially as we've tried to recoup the officers that were lost.
Party are playing catch-up.
They're playing catch-up. However, you can't just blame that on lack of police. There's clearly a societal problem at the moment.
Which is poverty.
Which is... It can't just be the cost of living crisis.
That's the only
it can't
true
just
correlation.
be poverty, because the cost of living
less
crisis...
money,
you can't say
crime rates
go up.
The cost of living crisis is more of a recent phenomenon. I think overall there's a loss of civic duty.
What you're saying is that poor people are criminals.
No, I'm not. I'm saying
you just said that. You said it's poverty.
You're
basically saying if you're poor, you're a criminal.
I'm saying that's
poverty.
Not true.
That's really awful thing to say.
That's not what I'm saying at all. There's a direct correlation between poverty rising and crime rates rising.
But just because you don't have enough money
one of the interesting things about what's just recently happened to Thomas
that's actually not true, though.
He had his money from where he was collecting for charity. He was on his mobility scooter with that. So it looks like the crime happened because somebody was trying to steal.
Yeah, I mean, you could say
we
that
don't know that.
You could say that with more poverty, more people commit crime, but actually, studies have actually shown that in times of recession, some violent crime rates have actually gone down. That was a statistic that I was really surprised by when I actually looked that up. So there's not always a direct correlation.
Because people pull together.
Like an excuse, Sarah. This seems like an excuse from Sadiq Khan.
Yeah, I mean, you can't blame the women to blame the weather. I know it's hot. Everybody is short-tempered when they're hot. Perhaps people will have more fights. They might have an extra beer on a Sunday afternoon and get into a brawl. But what we're not really talking about that kind of crime here. What we're talking about is vicious, targeted crime on defenceless people. That gentleman was a defenceless pensioner collecting money for charity. You'd expect him to be able to go... and this is a moral issue. This is a question about our society's morals and the people who live in our society who don't share those morals.
But, Amy, this is why I'm so big on the effect of decriminalisation of theft. And that is what has happened, by the way. It is that the number of thefts that are solved now, whether it's a robbery or mugging, it's well under 10%.
That's true, and that's a national problem. And I don't think you can park any of this at the door of Sadiq Khan.
Well, you can when crime rates are the highest in London consistently.
London is the biggest with the densest population, so of course it's going to have higher crime rates. But this is a national problem. We spoke about it last week.
That's not just because.
But I'm not parking all of this at the door of Sadiq Khan. By the way, I also think the Conservative government have serious questions to answer on this front. But in terms of the lawlessness in London, where I have lived, where I have been mugged 3 times under the reign of Sadiq Khan, whereas Boris Johnson and Kit Malthouse had a real focus on solving crime when he was the Mayor of London. I'm sorry, I am going to park that at the door of Sadiq Khan. His priorities are wrong. And the problem is, Amy, the effective decriminalisation of theft is leading to these violent crimes, because of course we don't know what happened with Mr. O'Halloran. Someone's been arrested.
But
We're not going to get
why
into the
has
details,
that
but in
happened?
quite a lot of cases, these muggings go wrong.
This is all happening because there's no resource, there's no funding, there's not enough numbers.
No, but
there's not enough
that's
people,
assuming
there's
that
not
some
enough
people.
investment
That's
in the
assuming
police
that some people
nationally.
aren't just bad people. The person that stabbed that 87-year-old man was an evil scumbag. You not having enough money does not make you
excuse that.
stab a
No.
defenceless
I don't care how
old man.
poor you are or how deprived you are.
People
you don't do
and
that
most
to somebody.
and you know most poor people don't actually go out there and commit crime.
No.
But the thing is, I mean, talk about decriminalisation of crime. Look at what's happened in America, where in San Francisco they've had that moratorium.
They've defunded the police
and what they've done is they've basically said you won't if you steal under $600 or whatever it is, that's not the figure, but roughly that, then you won't be prosecuted. So you've got people going around stores adding up how much the stuff that they're stealing
And
is worth.
they're going to take advantage of it, and that's why.
By the way, no one wants to be on the streets of San Francisco.
Well, no, you can't.
Exactly, but that's why with the police.
Also, one of the most dangerous.
But that's why with the police, it's better for them not to be social workers. It's better for them to be slightly feared and respected instead of viewed as cuddly people that you could just take advantage of.
But then they also need to be seen, so there needs to be more of them.
Yes.
Yeah, there does need to be more of them.
But there are a whole load of factors here because, of course, the police are so terrified now of committing a crime against woke, accidentally pulling over Dawn Butler, who's going to claim that it had to be because of her race, even though the windows are tinted. And so what message, when Sadiq Khan slams incidents like that, does that send to the rest of the Met? So I think there are a multitude of factors behind this. Absolutely. I'm not trying to simplify this. This is a very complex and complicated problem. But Sadiq Khan is a big part of the problem.
And who does he report to? Priti Patel.
What, on...
No.
Priti Patel is a Home Secretary. She is ultimately responsible
for the Met,
for policing, yeah.
But there are, I mean, he doesn't report to Priti Patel.
Maybe we need more actual control over Sadiq Khan then. I think he's allowed to his reign is a bit totalitarian at the moment. Maybe the Conservative government should take more control, and I think that would be a winner with voters as well.
Why isn't it? No one's actually mentioned the chief of the Met Police, because I think we've all kind of lost track of who it is now, because they have had about 10 different...
I think they're going for an election at the moment.
Because they're in the special measures at the moment, aren't they, after the exit of Cressida Dick. So the Met Police are also a huge problem. So that's the point. This is complex. But do not tell me that Sadiq Khan is not a significant part of the problem. He's not the only part of the problem.
He's not concerned about speed limits.
I think that's just one of the things he has control over. Just concentrate on the emissions, because I can actually do that one.
Slow down. Murder, though.
Dominic Samuel, Sarah Vine, my superstar panel, and they are here all night. But coming up, what can the next Prime Minister do to return law and order to Britain? Well, former Shadow Home Secretary Anne Widdecombe outlines her battle plan at 9:40. But up next, they're coming very soon. But do you want another COVID booster? We've got both camps covered, courtesy of Dr. Steve James, Professor Angus Dalgleish, Dr. David Loy, and Nina Mishkov too. But the most important opinion on this is yours. I'm actually so curious to know where you stand on the idea of being boosted again. Email me, dan@gbnews.uk. Tweet me using the handle @gbnews. We've got a poll running there too. The results and the clash after the break.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne. At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. And Wootton is coming up, but it's time now for The Clash. And it was announced by the NHS today that Omicron-tailored COVID booster vaccines will be rolled out for over 50s from September the 5th. It means some 25 million Brits eligible for top-up jabs can get one by the start of December. The mRNA vaccine has been produced by Moderna and the rollout programme will begin in care homes. But despite 98% of the population now thought to have natural immunity to COVID, ever-loitering former PM Tony Blair raised eyebrows this week by demanding everyone is given the new vaccine while also calling for the mandatory return of face masks on public transport. Blair, who has been consistently parroting from the pandemic sidelines, calling for vaccine passports and digital IDs, used the NHS to pile emotional pressure on us too. His think tank warned this winter will bring a perfect storm, resulting in unprecedented demand and reduced capacity, which will combine to create the worst winter crisis the NHS has ever had. What do you think? Are you going to take this emotional blackmail? Do you actually want another COVID booster? Let me know your thoughts. Dan at gbnews.uk. Tweet me at gbnews. While you're there, go vote in our poll, and the results will be coming up very shortly. But to help you make up your mind, debating this tonight, NHS consultant anaesthetist Dr. Steve James, writer and broadcaster Nina Mishkov, consultant medical oncologist Professor Angus Dalgleish, and NHS GP Dr. David Lloyd. Angus Dalgleish, why on earth would a healthy person who's had COVID numerous times need a booster? I don't get it. Do you?
Well, first of all, I totally agree. Make it very clear. I do not think they need boosters. Any vaccine that needs boosters does not work very well. And I've explained very well before on your programme that if you give a booster to the current COVID vaccine, you are boosting the response to the Alpha Delta Wuhan virus that's long since left the planet, and that Moderna and Pfizer have been working on Omicron, the latest ones. They'll give you a booster of this and you will be fine. No, you will not. We have seen data that is called antigenic sin. And that means if you give a booster to something that is different but similar to the first one, the immune system's been imprinted, all it will see is the first one. It will do you no good, it will produce loads of useless antibodies, and at the same time that will depress your T-cell response, which is the very thing you need to protect you from new variants and other viruses coming in.
So it could actually have a negative effect?
It has a negative effect after the third booster, and then the fourth booster is even worse. And the data is all there. You only have to look at countries like Israel that have done 4 boosters. Every time you do a booster, the protection from antibodies is less and less and lasts for shorter and shorter. And if you keep boosting with the vaccine, you will perturbate the immune system so it will not do its job against other new viruses. And in my case, what I'm really worried about, we're starting to see it interfering with cancer control. So I cannot understand why anybody at all would push for a booster of a vaccine that does not protect you from new virus infections at any rate.
OK, well, let me ask someone who is pushing for just that. Dr. David Lloyd, how do you respond to that very strong argument from Professor Dalgleish?
A very strong, unscientific argument, I'm afraid. The evidence is overwhelming that if you give booster vaccines against COVID, you prevent serious illness and death, and that's what we're in this business of. I think the professor says that it doesn't do an awful lot for getting the illness. I've had COVID twice, as well as being triple vaccinated. But the key thing is to avoid people dying and going onto ventilators. It is a big problem. Do you know how many people died of COVID last week?
But I'm not at risk of dying from COVID.
Why not? You're male, you're slightly overweight.
And my age?
Are you 30? But honestly, everybody thinks that yes, you're at risk of dying from COVID only if you're very old or very frail. That's much more a chart.
I'm statistically not at risk of dying from COVID, having had it 3 times.
We are all at risk of dying of COVID.
I must refute those claims. It is absolutely ridiculous to claim that the virus protects you of getting very ill and going to hospital. The wonderful studies done in South Africa show that Omicron is much more infectious, but it's much less likely to put you in hospital than
it is a less deadly virus.
Okay, don't both talk over each other. I'll let you respond, David, in just a second.
Last week. And we're in the middle of the mildest Omicron wave at the moment. That's not going to be the same come this winter. We are going to get many, many millions more infections. And who knows what the next strain is going to be. Each time we vaccinate, we provide a little protection. Even the Wuhan vaccine gives you a little bit of protection against Omicron. But as you know, we are going to be the first country in the world to give the bivalent vaccine. So we are protecting against both the Wuhan variant and the Omicron. So we are trying our best to keep this country safe, not only...
Well, the vaccine hasn't done a very good job, to be honest.
And to protect our NHS. We have the lowest number of ICU beds of any country in Europe, or when we used to be in Europe, and now we're stupidly on our own. And we are desperate to protect those ICU beds. 200 people are still on ventilators, or were on ventilators last week. Who knows what it's going to be in the middle of the winter? So anybody that says don't get a vaccine is saying don't protect the NHS, don't protect those who are most at risk from getting ill, don't protect those who are most at risk of dying. It is foolish propaganda to say don't get vaccinated.
Well, I think you are spouting quite a lot of propaganda, actually, because you're not looking at people's individual circumstances about whether they would be at risk from dying from COVID, whereas there are risks connected with the COVID vaccine.
There are so few contraindications to the virus. It causes such few problems that we should all get vaccinated without question.
Okay, well, tell that to the person who lost their leg, tell that to the person who lost their dad. Nina Mishkov, you want to come in?
Yes, I certainly do, because I'm staggered that scientific people and medicine as a science should be speaking like this, and surely this is a personal view as opposed to the view of the World Health Organization or the
died of COVID last week?
Do you respect, for instance, the Lancet? Well, the Lancet has stated that the vaccine has saved nearly 19 million lives around the world. The government statistics have shown that over 100,000 people have been saved by the vaccine. And I have
Nina,
had
do
four...
you trust the World Health Organization? Because you just mentioned them.
I trust that... Well, I'm asking if a doctor trusts the Lancet. Do Imperial College London, they have the same statistics. You can't rubbish every scientific or medical establishment.
Do you want the booster, Nina, on a personal level?
I have had 4 jabs, and I'm also happen to be taking part in a Public Health England survey of antibodies. So for 18 months, I have given blood before and after my boosters and at various times in between. So I can see, and I'm happy for people to see the actual thing, how my antibodies have gone up from, I don't know what the actual measurement is, from 2,255 before I had my 3rd dose to 17,000 in January, so that's 3 months later. So they do work, and while they do work, why should we not take advantage of them? And especially with winter coming up, absolutely ridiculous to listen to someone whose personal views are not scientific and rather arrogant.
Well, Nina, do you accept that perfectly healthy folk have died as a result of the vaccine?
I have no idea of the statistics. But of course, any treatment is going to cause risks. But the
so surely it
percentage,
should be a
the percentage
personal
of people,
choice, one that is based on personal
the percentage
risk
of people who have had adverse reaction to that is minimal compared to the millions.
But
and
Nina,
what about long
so
COVID?
is the risk of those people dying of COVID. But look, I want to bring in Dr. Steve James, who has been sitting there very patiently. Nina, just hold fire, because I want to bring in Dr. Steve James, who's been sitting there very patiently. Now, Steve, you were, of course, prepared to lose your job as a consultant anaesthetist in the NHS, not to take the vaccine. So you're in a very different place to Dr. David Lloyd and to Nina. So how would you respond to what they're saying, Steve? Because they're saying that your approach is irresponsible.
Dan, I've been working on intensive care since the beginning of the corona crisis, and the patients who are there with COVID now are not dying from COVID. They have got COVID. It's an incidental infection. I have not seen, and I don't know anyone else who's seen people with pure COVID pneumonitis, maybe one case in the last 6 or 8 months in intensive cares, and I've been working in 3 or 4 different locations in the country. So it's not a big problem at the moment on the intensive care units. Now, what's important to say is, are people who are healthy, is there any evidence, let's take someone like yourself, Dan, is there any evidence from a randomized controlled trial that using a booster is going to reduce the mortality? Can we inform someone like Dan that if he takes the booster, this is the outcome? If he doesn't take the booster, that's the outcome?
Government statistics state that you are twice as likely. You're twice as likely to not get long COVID if you have a vaccination.
Long COVID? Oh,
long,
goodness.
1.8 million. And actually, in today's Independent, it says an Oxford University study has shown that there's psychosis, dementia, seizures up to 2 years after. People's lives have been destroyed and changed by long COVID.
OK, Steve, what about the long COVID argument? That now seems to be the argument. Have the vaccine to stop long COVID.
There was an article recently about how vaccinated children had less long COVID than those who hadn't been vaccinated. And the whole point of the study was actually missed. The point was that the children who'd had COVID earlier on, when vaccines weren't available, had had a more virulent virus than those who'd been vaccinated and later on had had a less virulent virus. So everyone goes, oh, look, the vaccine protects you from long COVID. Rubbish. It was just a different time point.
Dr. David Lloyd, I just want to ask... Dr. David Lloyd, I just want to ask you...
You don't see what's really going on.
OK, sorry, Steve. Just lost you for a second there, but I understand your point. Dr. David Lloyd, I just want to ask you, when you are advising patients who are young, children, perfectly healthy, have had COVID before, do you warn them of the risk of side effects from the COVID vaccine, the risk of myocarditis, the risk of death,
the
risk of blood
the risks of
clots?
side effects from the vaccine are vanishingly small, and yet the risks of contracting COVID are really not insignificant at all. As I said, there are an awful lot of people. We know millions of people are having COVID at the moment, and people are still going into hospital with COVID.
So you think there's more risk of me dying from COVID than there is of dying from the vaccine?
It is difficult to distinguish COVID deaths, but people are dying. And we are also, don't forget, expecting a flu epidemic, and you are 2.4 times more likely to die if you have COVID and flu at the same time. So why not avail yourself of something that's free from the NHS, that is trusted, and have your flu jab and your COVID jab, and at least reduce the chances of you getting serious illness this winter? I really don't see any other argument that says don't do it. There's nothing
OK,
safer.
well, I'll give the final word to Angus Dalgleish to make that argument. Angus?
Well, I would just recoup what many of you have said, is that you've had COVID twice, COVID 3 times, you've had your vaccines 4 times.
I haven't had it at all, not once.
Not occurred to you that you're more likely to get infected if you have the vaccine. And if you look at the new variants, they follow where there's been hypervaccinations. No, now once you have a third vaccine, you will suppress the T-cell system, so of course you're going to get people who are iller. You give them the flu virus as well. These are inflammatory humoral vaccines. You want to boost the T cell response of elderly people and people
Such
with
arrogance to assume he knows better than the majority of scientists and medical people around the world.
Okay, don't all talk over each other. I will let you respond, Dr. David Lloyd. Just hold up. Angus, finish your point.
I would say, I do know what I'm talking about. People have said, you're a medical oncologist. Well, I ran a cancer vaccine program for nearly 30 years. I have been an NHS virologist. I've been an NHS immunologist. And I brought this all together. I've worked with the very best in the world. I know what I'm talking about. I do not understand how the government has been so badly advised with regards to the vaccine program for COVID. That's all I will say.
Quick final word, because you wanted to get something in there, Dr. David Lloyd.
I'm just saying he's talking nonsense. We should be getting the whole population vaccinated to reduce the chances of serious illness and overloading an NHS that doesn't have enough ITU beds, even for day-to-day
I'm sort of
illness.
sick of putting myself at unnecessary risk to protect the NHS. To be honest, I think it's about time they start protecting me.
Well,
but NHS GP Dr. David Lloyd,
We've got to think of everybody, not yourself.
Dan, one last point.
Yes, Steve. Come in.
Vaccination and the vaccination program, especially when offered to working age people, misses the point. The reason why people are sick and in hospital and are dying is not because of a COVID vaccine or not a COVID vaccine. It's due to their general state of health. There are far, far, far bigger factors affecting people's health than COVID.
Okay.
So what has killed all these millions of people around the world? They are just unhealthy. They just happen to be unhealthy, and they all happen to drop dead. That is absolute nonsense.
Okay. Well, look, fascinating debate. You've all had your say. NHS consultant anaesthetist Dr. Steve James. Thank you too to the writer and broadcaster Nina Mishkov, the consultant medical oncologist Professor Angus Dalgleish, and the NHS GP Dr. David Lloyd. So who do you agree with on this? Do you want another COVID booster? Having heard that from Rango on Twitter, without doubt, I'm done with these vaccines. I begrudgingly had the booster in order to finally go abroad, but never ever again. Healthy people with no comorbidities are not at major risk from the virus. From Joe. No one wants to have an injection. The real question is whether a yearly booster to keep COVID in check is the best solution we have at dealing with it from now on without reverting back to masks and restrictions. The answer is an empathetic yes, it's the best solution. And Johnny said, I've had enough chemicals, but if I want a holiday in Thailand and they insist on a boy booster, I might rethink. And your verdict is now in. Wow, just 16% of you say that you do want another COVID booster. 84% of you say you don't. Wow, overwhelming stuff. Coming up, as Brits insist they don't want to censor classic movies and TV shows, why are Liberals now the new Puritans destroying the entertainment industry? Hello, hello star Vicky Michelle leads the anti-woke resistance and marks the classic sitcom's 40th anniversary soon in The Outsider. But first, how can the next PM solve the crime epidemic sweeping lawless Britain? The Tories' former Shadow Home Secretary Anne Widdecombe joins me to give her expert advice straight after the break.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Ex-LOLO star Vicky Michelle is here to hit back at Liberals censoring the entertainment industry shortly. But first, it's time for Big Witty Style with political firebrand Anne Whittaker. As we discussed at the top of the show, a crime epidemic is sweeping the nation. But what can the next PM do to fix lawless Britain? Well, Anne is a former Conservative minister and Shadow Home Secretary, so she knows better than anyone what's needed to make Britain's streets safe again. And look, I have been thinking about Tom O'Halloran for the past 24 hours. It's one of those crimes which has just touched me in a way that is really emotional, actually. And it's made me think a lot about how policing in this country is out of control and how on earth are we going to fix it, Anne? I mean, do you have a solution?
Yes, I mean, I don't think it's rocket science, so it does require a certain amount of investment. If you lay aside for a moment your fanatics, that is your extreme Muslims or extreme whatever it might be, lay aside the fanatics whom you will not succeed in deterring. But those aside, the overwhelming majority of criminals commit crime because A, they don't believe they're going to be caught, and B, they don't believe that having been caught, they're going to face serious punishment. Now, if somebody is going upon a criminal enterprise quite convinced that the odds are that he will be caught, then the likelihood is he won't do it. But at the moment, we all know that the police don't take burglaries seriously, for example. So, I mean, he might as well go a burglaring. And he doesn't fear that he's going to be caught. And if he is, it doesn't follow that he's going to face much of a punishment. And so what we've got to do is, A, we need to expand the police force. And that doesn't just mean in London, that means across the country. And that is where the investment comes in. B, we've got to make sure that the police are concentrating on crime, not on non-crime hate incidents, not on policing thought, not on telling people that they need to educate themselves, but on actually fighting crime. So A, it's the numbers of police, B, it's what they're focused on. And then, of course, the police will tell you that they can spend hours processing somebody, and they then spend weeks and months gathering the evidence, and he goes to court and he gets what comes to not much more than a slap on the wrist. So we need also to look at the penalties for crime. In other words, the entire packet of deterrence, because that is what is going to make the difference. Now, there are some people you won't deter. You won't deter the Dennis Nielsens of this world. You won't deter the Ali Harbour Alis of this world. But the vast bulk of criminals, yes, there is a line of deterrence which will cause them to think. I mean, at the moment, you can walk out of your house carrying a knife. You can even be carrying that own knife fairly overtly. And you know the likelihood of being stopped and searched and then apprehended and taken into custody, nil.
I know, and I have a huge issue with the fact that we have effectively decriminalised theft, because it's theft and muggings that so often leads to these stabbings.
And the other thing that we have become extremely feeble about are drugs. Now, if you just look at the statistics, drugs account for about a third of all crime, but they account for about 80%, that's 80% of acquisitive crime. That's things like theft, burglary, shoplifting, whatever it might be. Now, if we actually took, as I advocated in 2000, a zero-tolerance approach to drugs, all the way from supply of the hard drugs, all the way down to possession of the soft drugs, if we did that and made the penalties appropriate, then we would have a major impact on crime itself.
I'm so with you. I'm so with you, Anne. I think we have to have zero tolerance on drugs. Absolutely. If only you were Home Secretary at the moment, Anne Widdecombe.
Only I were Prime Minister. Only I were King of the World.
We'll speak next week. You're Queen of the World here, Anne. Now, coming up, as train strikes cripple the country again, will Grant Shapps' Thatcher-inspired plan finally provide a solution to Mick Lynch's politically motivated strikes? I'll debate with my superstar panel at 10 p.m. The first newspaper front page is on the way then too. Also, as Brits insist they don't want to censor classic movies and TV shows, which modern audiences now find offensive, why are Liberals now the new Puritans destroying the entertainment industry? Former Allo Allo star Vicky Michelle will join me to discuss straight after the break.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Time now for The Outsider. Now, a new poll has shown that the majority of Brits are sick of classic films and TV shows being censored at the behest of woke liberals. The YouGov research revealed that, surprise, surprise, nearly 3/4 of Brits oppose the constant censoring by companies like the BBC. The Big Brother Corporation, as you know, has slapped content warnings on the iconic Blackadder, made substantial edits to the timeless comedy Dad's Army, and even entirely removed content from Steptoe and Son. Even Allo Allo, which is about to celebrate its 40th anniversary, has been slapped with mollycoddling trigger warnings. Now, let's remind ourselves of some of that golden era of uncensored comedy.
Kiss me.
Oh, Yvette, we must be careful. My wife has ears like a bat. She might be suspicious if she does not hear the sound of a game going on.
While you kiss me, I will make the balls go click in the bucket.
Just brilliant. And that is the kind of tongue-in-cheek genius that Liberals want scratched from screens. Well, I'm absolutely delighted to say that LOLO's very own Yvette Carte Blanche, Vicky Michelle, who's leading the resistance against the wokery ruining comedy, joins me now. Do you know what, Vicky? It really is like these new left-wing censors. They're like the modern-day Puritans, and it's very odd for me because I thought the left were meant to be into freedom of speech and outrageous comedy.
Exactly, but it's not even outrageous comedy. No. You know what I mean? It was family comedy.
Yeah.
Everyone watched it. Everyone laughed out loud. But I think what's happening now, and as you said, 75, I would have said 80%. 80% of everyone are sick to death. They want to watch what they want to watch. And if you don't want to watch it, don't.
The other thing that I feel really gets to me is this idea that we're too stupid to understand that, yes, this show was made in another era. And, yeah, there were different social norms. And actually, that's fascinating to look at how things have changed and developed and, in some cases, advanced.
Exactly. It's history. This is how it was. You can't change it. You can't say, that didn't happen. It happened. It was a great show. I mean, most people still love it. We're getting great viewing figures. We sold to, well, according to Jeremy Lloyd, about 90 countries, but someone else said about 60. But even so, all of those countries are still buying it, including Germany, that bought it in about 2008.
I love
that. Do you know what I mean? So who are the people that don't want to watch it or say it's not, you know, it's not watchable and we shouldn't say this and we shouldn't? Who are these people?
Well, we're coming up to the 40th anniversary, which is very scary, isn't it? But I do wonder if that's one of the reasons why shows like Hello Hello are having a bit of renaissance, because people don't like the new breed of woke comedy. You know, they like the old school stuff.
Because the old school makes you laugh out loud. And a lot of the new school doesn't make you laugh out loud. I've watched quite a few, and I'm a laugher. Yeah. And I might smile and maybe laugh once. Whereas these comedies, you know, we need humour back. We need a sense of humour. This country wants to laugh. They want to smile. They want things that make them happy. You know, and everything seems to be tailored to stop people being happy.
Yeah, we don't need political messages shoved down our throat in every single TV show either, do we?
No, we don't. You know, think what you want, do what you want, but don't inflict it on us, on the majority of the people, I think, in this country.
So how did you feel when you found out that there was a trigger warning on Hello Hello?
I thought it was funny. I just thought, what? This is a family show. As you said, you used to watch it as a child.
Yeah, I did actually. I watched it growing up.
Exactly. People grew up with this. It was a family show, you know, and it was the double entendres. And you know, the kids didn't get the sort of rude bits, but the grown-ups did. And it made it just one of those shows that I think I talked to so many people like you, and you say it was a fond memory of your childhood.
Absolutely.
And I think that, and that's good. Why are these people saying you shouldn't do this when it was... I mean, it was innocent humour.
Totally.
Innocent humour.
And these are classics, aren't they, from a different era? I mean, I put Fawlty Towers in the same category too, which has also been censored.
Are You Being Served?
Yes.
All of those. Dad's Army.
I know.
I mean, loved and revered by the British and all over the world as well, you know.
And shows that were a shared experience too, which is something obviously that we don't have now because of the change in the way that we watch TV. So I just think it's really bad that we're trying to erase some of our social history.
You can't erase it. It's like people, you know, that are upset about statues or something. You can't erase the history. If you erase the history, then you've got nothing to moan about, you know. I mean, the whole thing is that this is part of our culture. This is what, you know, how comedy was. And I think we need it again.
But you may have heard this week, Vicky, there has been a comedy show cancelled at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, actually at a venue that is meant to stand up for free speech. So it's not easy to be a comedian today, is it? We've seen the protests against Dave Chappelle, and I guess my biggest fear is that the comedians that aren't famous enough, like Chappelle and like Ricky Gervais, just end up self-censoring because they're so worried about being cancelled.
Well, that's the trouble. I mean, you know, and that shouldn't have happened. He shouldn't have been cancelled. You know, the Edinburgh Festival, that's not what it's about.
No.
It's about free speech. And as he said, if you don't like my show, you've got the warnings. If you don't want to see my show, don't see my show. And I think that you have to, if it's his sense of humour, it's whether it's your sense of humour. You know, I'm not going to go and see a comedian.
Walk out.
Exactly. If I'm not going to go and see a comedian that I don't want to see.
How are you celebrating the 40th?
How am I celebrating? I celebrate every day. I think I'll probably meet up with the guys again. You know,
but no reunion.
I'm seeing Francesca, who played Maria. I'm seeing her tomorrow, and I spoke to Sticky, that's Richard Gibson, the other day, and Arthur. So I'm popping into Edinburgh. So I'm probably going to go and see Arthur. So we all keep in touch, and so yeah, it'd be lovely.
Vicky Michelle. Hello will never be censored or cancelled in my world, that I guarantee.
Thank you. So lovely to see you.
Great to see you, Vicky. It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, those out-of-control rail unions have again been causing pandemonium across the UK, and Mick Lynch is determined to make exasperated Brits blame the government.
Grant Shapps seems fairly desperate. What I think you're seeing is a man who's worried about his future. He's got to try and flex his right-wing muscles in front of a parade of two really right-wing people that are going to be his boss.
Well, could his plan backfire thanks to Grant Shapps and his Thatcher-inspired solution to the strikes? I'll assess his battle plan next with my superstar panel. Top Daily Mail columnist Sarah Vine, Conservative commentator Dominique Samuels and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole. After an arrest is made following the horrifying case of the 87-year-old grandfather stabbed to death on his mobility scooter in West London, you won't believe the excuse Sadiq Khan has given for lawlessness in the capital.
Afraid this summer we are seeing what we feared, which is an increase in violent crime as there are longer daylight hours, school holidays, heat wave and so forth.
Yeah, it's all down to the weather. Well, Khan's got to be a contender for the final Union Jackass of the week, which will be unveiled alongside the Greatest Britain at 10:50. Will leadership frontrunner Liz Truss be able to deliver opportunity equality across the UK? Levelling Up Minister Paul Scully explains why he's backing her for PM and gives his verdict on Graftgate. That's live at 10:15. And amid fears of a cashless society that could allow governments to take our money, is Truss right to vow to protect notes and coins? Social media sensation Zubi joins me for that in Uncancelled at 10:40. With top A-level grades plummeting post-pandemic, is it right for universities to prioritise poorer students? And are white working-class boys still being overlooked in an era of privilege propaganda? We'll debate at 10:30. Plus, you've heard of a McRib, right? Well, multi-millionaire Rishi Sunak has been caught in a McFib in his latest botched attempt at relatability.
Brown, no hash brown.
So I didn't yesterday, but if I'm with my daughters, then we get the wrap.
Oh, the girls like the
my
wrap.
eldest daughter is all we get the wraps. If I'm with her, that wrap with the hash brown and everything in it is what we do.
Girl after my own heart.
Yeah, that, I mean, she's.
Something smells fishy, Rishi. And it's Partygate with a twist as the Finnish Prime Minister is forced to defend her love of a boogie. There wasn't even a single M&S sandwich in sight, was there? We'll get into those viral stories of the day in the media buzz throughout the next hour. Tomorrow's newspaper front pages on the way too. But first, the news headlines with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Dan. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. The A-level results are in, and the number of top grades awarded to students in England, Wales and Northern Ireland has fallen since last year. Despite that, they do remain higher than pre-pandemic levels. UCAS revealed that the number of students accepted at universities and colleges has also dropped. Union bosses say strike action will continue until a settlement is reached. More than 40,000 rail workers walked out today and will again on Saturday in a dispute over pay and conditions. Public transport in London will also be affected by industrial action tomorrow. Greater Manchester Police have released a third image of a man they wish to speak to in connection with a sexual assault on a 6-year-old girl. The child was taken into a wooded area in Droylsden at around 4 p.m. yesterday and then to a van where she was attacked. She was reunited with her family shortly afterwards and is receiving specialist support. Parents are being warned to be extra vigilant with their children. Police have searched a house in connection with the fatal stabbing of an 87-year-old man in West London. Officers carrying forensic equipment were seen entering the property earlier on. Thomas O'Halloran was riding his mobility scooter when the incident occurred on Tuesday. Detectives say a 44-year-old man has been detained in relation to the killing. He was arrested at an address in Southall in the early hours of this morning. British travellers struggled to check in for flights today after the NHS app and website went down. Users trying to access their vaccination records found the service unavailable with no alternative to access the information. Despite the NHS COVID pass being scrapped earlier this year, it's still required when travelling to certain countries such as Spain and the Netherlands. Almost 1,000 Albanian criminals and immigration offenders have been deported from the UK so far this year. That's according to the latest Home Office figures. Those removed on recent flights include offenders convicted of rape, sexual offences involving children, kidnap and serious assaults. The Home Secretary says the latest figures should serve as a warning to all foreign national offenders. And the man accused of stabbing novelist Salman Rushdie in New York has pled not guilty to charges of second-degree attempted murder and assault. 24-year-old Hadi Matar is accused of wounding the 75-year-old just before he was about to deliver a lecture. Rushdie sustained severe injuries, including nerve damage in his arm and wounds to his liver. The attack came 33 years after a fatwa was issued against Mr. Rushdie over the publication of his book, The Satanic Verses. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Back now to Dan.
Tomorrow's News Tonight now in our Media Buzz. So let's kick off with a first look at the front pages hot off the press. And in the eye, a no money warning for the likely next PM Liz Truss. The Office for Budget Responsibility will reportedly tell the leadership frontrunner that she will have billions of pounds less than she thought to fund tax cuts. The Daily Telegraph leads with the effects of lockdown, and I love this story because it's so important, potentially killing more people than those dying of COVID. That's according to official data. 1,000 more people than usual are dying each week from other conditions, according to the analysis of ONS XF death figures. Medics have called the figures terrifying. My superstar panel back with me now, Star Daily Mail columnist Sarah Vine, political commentator Dominique Samuels and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicole. Now, in the union's continued bid to cause chaos for hard-working Brits, rail workers have walked off the job in yet another day of industrial action. Only 20% of train services have been running across the country today as 45,000 union members hit picket lines in an ongoing dispute over pay. Speaking this morning, the militant RMT boss Mick Lynch blamed the Tory leadership contest for the strikes as he continued his politically motivated attack on the government.
Grant Shapps is getting more and more hysterical. I try to keep a calm temperament in everything that I say. I'm not angry about this. I'm determined to get a deal. Grant Shapps seems fairly desperate. What I think you're seeing is a man who's worried about his future. He's got to try and flex his right-wing muscles in front of a parade of two really right-wing people that are going to be his boss if he has a job in the next week or two. So I don't know what Grant Shapps is up to. I don't think the employers really know what he's up to. And I don't think that the officials at the Department for Transport knows what he's up to.
Well, Transport Secretary Grant Shapps thinks he has the solution to the rail fiasco as he revealed yesterday a Thatcheresque 16-point plan to take on union barons. It includes lifting the ban on the government using emergency powers to block strikes that pose a national emergency and introducing legislation ensuring that a minimum number of services run during walkouts. The minimum threshold of support for strike action would also be raised from 40% of eligible workers to 50%. But Sarah Vine, will anything stop Mick Lynch on what just seems to me like a political crusade to usher in a winter of discontent?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's clearly very politically motivated because if you drill down into the actual figures around what these people are getting paid, they're not that badly paid really in comparison to the general public. But it's just very unfair on anyone who is in the private sector whose livelihood relies on them being able to use public transport. I mean, you know, if you can't get to work, if you're on a 0 hours contract and you don't have someone like, you know, big bruiser like Mick Lynch, you know, at your back, you can't get to work. You can't make your money. You won't get paid for your day. What are you going to do? How are you going to feed your kids? It's very unfair. The thing is that Keir Starmer, you know, people need to understand that the unions basically finance most of the Labour Party. That's where much of their money comes from. And he has been very quiet about all of this stuff. You know, he's not standing up to them at all. He's just letting them run riot. He could be protecting all of those people who are not unionised, who are also, you know, voters and who deserve to be able to make a living, but he's not. He's just letting them do what they want. He has no control over them. So, you know, the Tories have got very little choice but to sort of try and tighten the screws. And, you know, I don't know whether Grant's ideas will work. It will be very painful one way or the other because they've really got the Tories over a barrel. Because if you strangle transport, I mean, in London, you know, we've had... it's almost impossible to get around London now anyway because of the fact that everything's been converted into a cycle lane. The public transport, you know, my daughter was trying to get home from work today because they stopped. The tube stopped today at 5 o'clock and she was trying to get home. She tried to get on a bus. She couldn't get on the bus because there were too many people on the bus and the buses weren't letting anyone on. She walked for a bit, then she tried to get a cab and she couldn't get a cab. Then she tried to get another bus and it took her about 2 hours to get home. You know, that's inconvenient and she's a teenager, it doesn't really matter. But if you imagine if you've done a really long day's work and you're at the end of your shift and you've got to get home for your kids, you know, you've got to feed them, whatever, what are you supposed to do? I mean, it's just really mean.
Dominic, it's despicable. And the problem is, of course, the privileged folk work from home, of course they do, but it's the people who can't do that.
Yeah, this is, of course, going to have a knock-on effect, but I feel as though this is reflective, the strikes and the calls for higher pay. I feel like this is reflective of what's to come. I think there is a lot worse to come. I think whatever the government do, Mick Lynch won't stop. He's to give it to him, he's a very charismatic character. There's something about him that people are drawn to. They feel as though he speaks for them. And it's not really something we've seen from really any of our politicians.
For a long time.
For a long time, that vigour, that spirit. And that's what people want. Whether or not, you know, his politically motivated campaign is right or wrong is another thing completely. But we're at a point in society where technological advancement and retaining people's old jobs are going to come to a head. I think rail workers are just the start. There's going to be many more sectors that are going to be replaced by artificial intelligence, more technologically focused tools. And I think the government needs to be honest with people about that because, yes, you know, Grant Shapps does make a good point. There are savings that can be made, for example, using drones to monitor tracks, for example, where you don't necessarily need rail workers, but be honest with people about that and let them know that it's not just rail workers. A lot of people are going to have their jobs replaced.
Well, of course, but one of the ironies when it comes to the rail is that one of the reasons people stopped using so many trains was because of the lockdown. But the problem is now they're stopping using the trains because they're too terrified to book tickets because they think there might be strike action.
Exactly.
Amy Nicole, you think Mick Lynch is one of the most popular men in the country?
Oh, I just absolutely love him.
Why?
He's just fantastic, isn't he?
Why?
He has defied odds to become this figure that actually engages people and is likeable and is charismatic and has turned public opinion.
You're talking about him as if he's a cult leader.
I think that...
you seem a bit obsessed.
I think the government were pretty certain in the fact that he could be relied upon, RMT could be relied upon to come down on strikes and to say, look, public, this is why we need to ban striking and restrict people standing up for themselves. But then Mick Lynch came in and suddenly changed everyone's minds, and everyone was like, actually, I really support these strikes. I get it. I see what this guy's doing, and I want to have.
Do you have evidence of that support?
Yeah, totally. So I think it's at the moment it's over 50. The majority of people support the strikes as opposed to don't support the strikes, and I think it's engaging people and it's galvanising other industries to get involved and do similar things themselves. I think the Royal Mail...
So you
next
support
week,
the idea of a winter of discontent?
I absolutely support the idea of every industry being able to defend their terms and conditions of their contracts and to demand...
So to hell with
to
people
require
who are
pay
trying to
that
get
is within the cost of,
to a normal life, to
cost
hell
of
with
living,
people
in
who are
line
trying
with
to
that.
travel, to hell with small businesses that are trying to operate.
Well, yeah, so this, again, you're putting it at the door of the wrong group, I think. I think this is entirely at the door of the government. The RMT use this as a last resort.
Well, they've been offered
It's
a decent pay rise,
I mean,
Sarah,
I
and the
think-
problem is if the government were to give in to Mick Lynch, think of what that would do to inflation.
I think people support the principle of being able to go on strike. People will, and I think that's correct. I think people should be able to, make representation if they don't feel that they're properly being treated. But there's a difference between having a principle of people being able to go on strike and just being unreasonable.
Yeah.
Which is what this is. I mean, this is clearly, it's politically motivated primarily, not, I don't think, coming from a place of trying to make the labour force have a better
And it'll be very interesting, won't it, to see in a few months' time if he continues to unleash this sort of havoc and he does encourage other unions to follow
the havoc.
suit if the public still do support
Yeah, I mean, the thing is,
strikes.
he's playing with fire because I think if people really can't get to work and if people really find their lives are absolutely a misery.
Well, what about
and
people
what's
who are
gonna
missing
happen-
hospital appointments?
What's going to happen when people can't, go to work because the schools are all on strike and they can't? That's going to be problematic, and you could end up with a proper backlash, I think.
So just give the workers what they want and give them the conditions. And
Oh, yes, that's really realistic, isn't it, Amy? I mean, maybe in your proud cuckoo land socialist world that works, but do you not understand if public sector workers were to be given these massive 16% pay increases to match inflation, what's going to happen?
I mean, they
to
already
inflation?
have a much better deal than a lot of low-paid private sector.
Absolutely, they do.
I think that
who are facing no pay.
Who are facing no pay rise, no help, no pension, no security.
Sarah, that's exactly the reason we need unionised industries and unions to stand up for people. Because if we don't, that's going to happen. You mentioned 0 hours contracts. Nobody should be on a 0 hours contract.
No, there are some benefits to 0 hour contracts,
for some
especially
people.
for younger people. It allows you to be far more flexible. I think actually have more control.
I think possibly the cons outweigh the benefits on that one.
Okay.
It should be an option.
Okay, well, it can be an option, but what I mean is everybody deserves to have a job which allows them to live without massive
if this is where
profits
Mick Lynch goes, then I think a lot more rail workers will actually, in the long term, end up losing their jobs, and that's the consequence. Anyway, alongside his disloyalty, one of Fishy Rishi's most common pitfalls in his bid for number 10 has been his relatability, shall we say, given he and his wife are worth a cool £730 million. The PR campaign to reduce Sunak from billionaire backstabber to empathetic everyman hit a slight road bump earlier this year when he seemed to be unable to figure out just how contactless cards worked. But it looks like he was back on track this week after a clearly spontaneous trip to McDonald's. That is, until earlier today on This Morning, when he was asked for his favourite order. And that's when it all went wrong once again.
Brown, no hash brown.
So I didn't yesterday, but if I'm with my daughters, then we get the wrap.
Oh, the girls like the
my
wrap?
eldest daughter is, or we get the wraps. If I'm with her, that wrap with the hash brown and everything in it is what we do.
Girl after my own heart.
I mean, she's.
Now, look, you might think that sounds like a perfectly valid answer, but there's a big issue. The McDonald's wrap that Sunak claims to buy regularly with his daughters hasn't been on the menu since, wait for it, March of 2020. That's over 2.5 years of imaginary breakfast wraps. I think he should have ordered the fillet of Fishy Rishi instead. Sarah Vine, Dominic Samuels, Amy Nicole. I was very heated about this one because I loved that breakfast wrap. I loved that breakfast wrap, Sarah. And if you love McDonald's, you knew that breakfast wrap was no
I have
longer in
never
service.
recovered from Pret discontinuing their scrambled egg and tomato baguette.
You should have asked him
like
again.
I actually put a suggestion in the suggestion box every time I go in there saying, please, can you bring it back?
Look, my superstar panel will stand by because coming up with top A-level grades plummeting post-pandemic, is it right for universities to prioritise poorer students? And are white working-class boys still being overlooked in an era of privilege propaganda? We'll debate that in the Media Buzz at 10. 10:30. More newspaper front pages then too. But first, will leadership frontrunner Liz Truss be able to deliver opportunity equality across the UK? Levelling Up Minister Paul Scully gives his backing to our likely next PM. He's live straight after the break.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Zuby is uncancelled on the dangers of a cashless society shortly, but first it's time for the latest on the battle to be PM. Tory leadership frontrunner Liz Truss was hysterically criticised by the craven left-wing media and political establishment this week for the crime of wanting to increase British productivity. Here's some of the leaked audio of Truss, which is apparently from the time she was number 2 at the Treasury half a decade ago. That was dishonestly twisted as a jibe at British workers in that flop Guardian hit piece.
There's a slight thing in Britain about wanting easy answers, and I think that's, that's my reflection on the election and what's gone before it. And the referendum, it's like we say it's all Europe that's causing us all these problems. So it's migrants that are causing these problems. And actually, what needs to happen is, a bit more graft.
Absolutely nothing wrong with encouraging good old-fashioned graft so that Britain is able to compete on the global marketplace. But with the Bank of England expected to double interest rates in the next 6 months and inflation soaring to a 40-year high of 10.1%, the country is heading into a crisis. So how is our probable next Prime Minister going to level up the country? Well, I'm joined now by Paul Scully, who replaced Kemi Badenoch as Levelling Up Minister and was also Minister for London. Good evening, Paul. Of course, you are supporting Liz Truss. So did you agree with me that there wasn't actually anything wrong with this Guardian hit piece in terms of Liz Truss talking about British workers needing to have maybe a bit more graft? Because fundamentally, we do need to increase our productivity, don't we?
Absolutely. We need to increase our productivity. I was previously the Minister for Small Business, and I was working on the Help to Grow schemes there, which introduced structured management techniques for small businesses, increased digital take-up, and that's all about, making sure, you have more graft, but you also have the tools to do the job so you can work smarter as well. If we add German levels of productivity, that would add an estimated £100 billion to our GDP. So the significant gains to be had there, and there should be nothing wrong with actually calling out. It's not writing off individuals and individual people or groups of people. It's just saying it as it is, how we need to tackle as a government and face up to the facts as in front of us.
Because, of course, the argument, Paul, and you will have seen it from the likes of Angela Rayner, they are going to try and paint Liz Truss as someone who is no longer committed to levelling up. Of course, you are now the levelling up minister. You are supporting Liz Truss. Why are you convinced that she is the right candidate to continue levelling up the country?
Because when I've seen Liz in action, when I've seen her speaking to members and indeed the wider country, you know, she speaks to a range of people, from people I speak to as Minister for London, but also people, you know, using her background. She often talks about her background growing up in Paisley and Leeds. She's obviously a Norfolk MP. She spends a lot of time in London. So she knows the country right the way across the country. But levelling up is all about levelling up people. Inevitably, it goes into geography, but you start off on the premises about how can you give people better opportunities that they can grab. And that's good Conservative values. And that's what Liz often talks about.
No, indeed. Indeed. Paul, what do you make of folk who are saying, including, by the way, Trevor Kavanagh in The Sun, so hardly a critic of the government at most times, that this entire contest is now just a vanity project? Liz is going to win. It's time for the Tories to wrap this up because we are facing an economic emergency. Is there anything in that?
No, because look, what we're doing, clearly all of the members around the country need to have their say. They need to be able to ask their questions for the reasons that you've just been saying. It's not about just, oh, let's have a hustings in Whitehall or something and then the job's done. We've got to get around the country because you're testing not just seeing who's going to be the party leader, you're testing the next Prime Minister of the UK. And that's really important that they've gone through and been tested so that they can then face down what we're seeing at the moment with cost of living pressures and inflation. But in the meantime, this isn't just something that's going on in isolation. You've got Nadhim Zahawi, the sitting Chancellor, that's working on various options, doing all the deep thinking to give the new incoming Prime Minister the choices. Greg Hands, the Energy Minister, doing likewise. I've been on the phone to a load of local authorities to chase them up to get, whilst they are now at the moment getting the support out that Rishi Sunak announced in this £37 billion package to people now, not after the next Prime Minister comes in, but now when they need it.
Paul, I want to ask you about Boris Johnson. You never turned on the Prime Minister, did you?
No, I was there. You know, I supported him to the end. I think at the end it was time for him to go, to be honest, because it was just becoming too much about that inner circle, those Westminster, Whitehall stories, and there was the media focus was well away from these pressures that we're facing.
I know you are supporting Liz now, as am I. But do you worry that your party might look back at a couple of years and think that was just a massive act of self-harm? Removing a Prime Minister with an 80-seat majority, a Prime Minister who had delivered Brexit, and a Prime Minister who, according to the polls, actually poses more of a threat to the Labour Party at the next election than either of the current candidates.
No, I think three things there. First of all, no, we don't actually, to be fair, because I think we have to move on. We are where we are. There's just no point in going back. I think what we should have done as a party is we should have sorted out things like Partygate and other things, nipped it in the bud last Christmas. We had 8 months talking to ourselves and talking around the situation, which is what got us in that little spiral. But the third thing, I think, is that I'm less fussed about whether Boris, whether Rishi, whether Liz or anyone is better faced to get better positioned against Keir Starmer and the Labour Party now. It's what happens at the next general election, because that's the next test. And so it's all about delivery now. It's about good communication, telling people what we are doing, what we're going to do, explain it as we go along. But it's about making sure we deliver on our promises and deliver for people who are worrying about the cost of living and inflation.
Paul, just finally, want to talk to you in your role as Minister for London. Of course, we have been absolutely shocked. I know I have felt rocked the past 24 hours by the despicable slaying of Thomas O'Halloran, a 87-year-old grandfather stabbed to death on his mobility scooter. There's been 6 murders in London in the past 4 days. It feels like an epidemic of crime. Is London now lawless, and who's to blame?
Look, it's not lawless. I think it's important that we don't, overstate it because of the tourism and about, any time you overstate things, it can worry. But who's to blame? I think, clearly we need to make sure that that criminals cannot walk the streets with impunity. And the Police and Crime Commissioner of London is the Mayor of London, is Sadiq Khan. And today he was talking about, he was explaining away crime, rising crime in London as being school holidays. Crikey, no, it's about actually facing down to it, making sure we've got a safe environment, making sure we've got the night tube running, frankly, the tube running, but night tubes would be good as well, so that women in particular can feel safe at night. These are the things, that's what he's there to do, that's what he should be doing, and that's what he should be held accountable for.
OK, Liz Truss back, a Levelling Up Minister and Minister for London, Paul Scully. Thank you so much, Paul. But coming up, amid fears a cashless society could allow governments to take our money, as we saw with the Freedom Convoy in Canada, by the way, is Liz Truss right to vow to protect notes and coins? Social media sensation Zubian cancelled on this at 10:40. But next, in the Media Buzz, as A-levels plunge post-pandemic, are universities right to prioritise places for poorer pupils as backed by the new Education Secretary? My Superstar panel return to debate that and whether working-class white boys applying to university will ever be considered a disadvantaged group in the era of privilege propaganda. That's in the Media Buzz straight after the break. More newspaper front pages too, so don't go anywhere.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Let's return to tomorrow's news site now on our Media Buzz. More front pages in. The Daily Mirror leads with the story of 87-year-old cancer sufferer David Wakely, who was left waiting for an ambulance on the ground outside his home for 15 hours after a fall. His family built a makeshift tent to cover him through the night. They ask what has become of our country. The Daily Star tells of the drastic answer to the energy crisis of average Brit Tom Church, who's planning to save on energy bills by renting in Europe. He's switching off gas and electricity and moving to Spain and France after the price cap rise in October. And The Guardian reports that annual bonuses for water bosses rose 20% in 2021. Executives received £100,000 in one-off payments on top of their salaries. On the front page of the Daily Express, Truss promises new laws to smash strike misery. That's right, the PM hopeful is planning to crack down on the militant unions holding the country to ransom. That has to be some good news. More on the Media Buzz now with tonight's superstar panel. Top Daily Mail columnist Sarah Vine, the political commentator Dominique Samuels, and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicole. Now, the cost of draconian lockdown measures was written on the faces of disappointed teens across the country today as students saw the biggest ever drop in top A-level grades. In the first exam since the start of COVID, around 60,000 fewer A and A star marks were awarded as the government tries to clamp down on the record score inflation during the pandemic when papers were assessed by teachers. According to UCAS, almost 4,000 more students from disadvantaged backgrounds have received the results for their first or second university choice this year compared to 2019. And it's not by chance, as reports back in May revealed top universities are offering places to lower class children with A-level results up to 3 grades lower than middle class teenagers. The, quote, social engineering move has been backed by Education Secretary James Cleverly, who says he is not uncomfortable with universities using the background of children to decide between applicants with similar grades. But these seemingly positive figures mask some of the serious disparities, with separate data from the Department of Education showing white school leavers are now the least likely to go to highly selective universities. For the first time, they've been overtaken by young black people and have the lowest chance of any ethnic group of joining institutions with the toughest entry requirements. Responding to the findings, Professor of Social Mobility at Exeter University, Lee Elliott Major, warned we need to recognise that white working class boys now suffer some of the lowest university participation rates compared with any other groups. So do you think, Sarah Vine, universities are right to prioritise students based on their social class, or is there some form of social engineering?
I think it depends what you think universities are for. If you think they're seats of higher learning, then obviously no. If you think they are social engineering projects, then obviously yes.
What do you think they
are? I think they are seats of higher learning. I think if you want to help people from lower socio-economic backgrounds get to university, you should do that by making it easy for them to go financially. And I think the government has not done that because we have a system where young people have to put themselves in masses of debt to get to university. They have to pay their fees and then they have to pay their maintenance. And when I was a young thing, if you came from, if your parents were below a certain financial bracket, you got everything paid for. So provided you worked hard and passed your exams and did well, you could go to university and that was paid for. And I think that is a good thing to do. I think that does help people. But I think what you're doing now is you're basically... I don't think young people should be judged generally by what their parents do. And I think that if people's parents are successful and work hard, their children shouldn't be penalised for that. And I think that's effectively what you're doing. And I think Cleverly is, I'm amazed that he can describe himself as a conservative for saying what he's just said.
Yeah, I think at first when I read this, slightly biased because I'm the first person from my family to finish even my A-levels, never mind go to university. And for me, the biggest barrier was not having the same access to certain things. For example, doing university stays, going to visit universities, because all of this stuff is really quite expensive. So I had to go out of my way to find charities that would actually help me do that. And then when I eventually got accepted to my university, I couldn't actually afford to go. What actually helped me afford to go was I had to take out an overdraft with my bank because my student loan only dropped on the day my course actually started. So if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have actually been able to afford to do anything. So that's why, that's why I'm slightly biased. But when I think about it, I think right now we're at a place in society where we are effectively wiping out the middle class. And I think that's really concerning because, yes, even though middle class students may have parents that earn more, that doesn't mean, for example, their maintenance loan actually covers a lot of the costs that come with university. And economically right now, middle-class families are arguably the hardest hit. They're getting the least support from the government. People that don't work actually are getting the most support. So really, you'll see more and more kids going to university and not actually getting much support either from the government or their parents. So it's actually worse for them. That being said, on the other hand of this, I do think that background is important. If you are a child from a really poor-performing school and you're able to achieve, say, A-star, AA, I think that's a real testament to your character and how you will perform later in life compared to someone who's had private schooling and had a tutor. So there are two sides to this, but I think we should need to be careful about attacking the middle class so much, because a few years from now, you know, with the upcoming recession that's predicted, it's the middle classes and middle class students that are going to be the hardest hit.
Amy, you just love this social engineering, don't you? You want more of it.
I did actually find it surprising to be in agreement with James Cleverly, but I think... But this isn't a new idea.
Maybe
so
Sarah's point is right. He's not conservative if he's agreeing with Amy Nicole.
This idea of contextual admissions policies has been around. Like, it's almost as predictable a story as the two girls jumping in the air with their A-level results. Like, this argument comes around every single year. And actually, it's been in place in universities since the early 2000s, where they look at the context of the student completely. But it's not necessarily like state school versus private school. It's more complex than that. It's just looking at the entire background and upbringing of the child in comparison to somebody with similar grades to get a full picture of what you're making the admission to. And something that's really interesting, I think, is that actually, so children from state schools, when they go to university, sorry, I should say pupils, not children, young people who go to university from state schools actually do better and they get more firsts than admissions
What
from
about the
private
white
schools.
working class boys, Amy? Are you worried about them? Because you seem to worry about a lot of minority
This is
groups.
the only time I've ever heard you worrying about the working classes, Dan.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
Absolute rubbish.
I think if we're going to reframe that, it's the working classes, some of whom are white, that aren't doing as well in their exams.
White working class boys specifically, though.
Yeah.
I mean, why do you
See,
think that
specific
is,
demographic in trouble.
Because
in
they're
this
the
country.
biggest number of them, surely.
No.
So what we need to look at is how...
That's not why.
I think that there's a problem with
What about white working class girls?
With the way that we look at schooling and the way that we look at giving people equal opportunities. There isn't equal opportunities currently.
No, the reason why...
So we need to work on social mobility, and I think that this whole contextual admission...
The reason why white working class boys are doing the worst at the moment and are less likely for the first time ever than ethnic minority pupils to get to university is because we're in a state in our society where white working class men and white working class people are demonised. They're viewed as an underclass. They're not...
and they're not given any support.
They're not given any support. Ethnic minority children are given a lot of support, and white working class boys, they simply don't cut it. It's not woke enough. These teachers can't pat themselves on the back for helping working class.
I think there's a problem here. I think I think the other thing is to say that further education doesn't just have to be about academic subjects. I think what this country has been quite bad at historically is vocational subjects. So I think that, you know, there ought to be more options than just going to university and doing a 3-year degree where you write lots of essays. You know, some people don't want to do that. Some people are not suited to do that. Some people would like to learn a trade, or they'd like to do something different, and they should be allowed. They should have that opportunity, and we don't give it to them.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I think if you post Tony Blair, we've sort of come into
fetishised
fetishise it, and we've come into a way of thinking.
And you've seen all over the news again today. This complete fetishisation of universities, and actually for so many young kids,
it's not the right way forward. No,
it's not. Yeah, it's not for them.
And look, it's not often that we delve into the world of Finnish politics, but the Nordic country is currently experiencing a very different Partygate scandal. 36-year-old Prime Minister Sanna Marin, who is the third youngest state leader in the world, has been forced to fight for her right to partay after footage of her engaging in some would say unstatesmanlike raving was leaked. The Helsinki Hellraiser admitted she was, quote, disappointed by the expose, but refused to be shamed. She's quoted as telling a local broadcaster, I partied pretty wild, yes. Somewhat more seriously, she was forced to deny allegations of using or seeking drugs at the party after her friends were seen shouting a euphemism for cocaine in the clips. Given how the UK got into a tiz over a few Zoom quizzes and a couple of crusty sandwiches, the reaction is sadly to be expected, but everyone deserves to let their hair down, don't they? I mean, and to be honest, I'd rather Boris had moves like her instead of this. I'm not sure I can tweet any of this. I actually love the Finnish
No
Prime
one has
Minister doing
ever
this.
explained to me why that woman is holding a lightsaber. is that a euphemism?
There's nothing wrong with this Finnish Prime Minister.
I have to say, I look at that video and I think there must have. I suspect there's footage that's worse. That looked like a party that got worse.
Sarah, my Dominic do stand by. But coming up, what shocking excuse did Sadiq Khan give for the lawlessness in London? I'll reveal all as I crown my final Greatest Britain and Union Jackass of the week soon. But first, amid fears a cashless society could allow governments to take our money, as happened with the Freedom Convoy in Canada, is Liz Truss right to protect notes and coins? Rapper, author and podcast host Zuby uncancelled next. First, though, quick look at what's coming up on Monday's show. Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, as Britain's unis prepare for a new intake of students, are they poisoning the minds of our youth and turning them against free speech? Writer and pollster Matt Goodwin breaks down what's going on at those rotten institutions. Plus, there's opinion galore, including from pop favourites turned free speech advocates Right Said Fred. And my superstar panel, Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and political commentator and former Brexit Party MEP Belinda DeLucy. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday, from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. But it's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. We saw how COVID accelerated the demise of cash, with businesses and many folk reluctant to handle notes and coins over health fares. But new data shows Britain is now hurtling towards a cashless society. Just 1 in 6 payments were made using cash last year, while a third were contactless. The hot topic has now even been thrust into the Tory leadership contest, with Liz Truss vowing in Belfast last night to protect cash from extinction.
Many people are now returning to cash to balance their household budget, yet many businesses will actually refuse to accept cash. What could you do to assist those people who prefer to use cash?
Well, you are right, and it seems to me some businesses will only accept cash and some businesses will only accept cards. But we should make sure that people are able to use cash where they don't have alternatives. I think that is important and it's a fair point.
But many argue the premise of cash goes beyond just convenience. Without cash, you lose privacy, liberty and freedom to transact away from private eyes, and that's ultimately a threat to democracy. China's digital yuan is programmable, meaning the government can freeze and set expiry dates on citizens' money for whatever reason they see fit. And just look at how the Canadian truckers were treated during their standoff with COVID authoritarian Justin Trudeau. Donations of up to £15 million were seized by lefty banks and donation websites under the guise of national security, and the truckers were powerless to stop it. So I'm delighted now to be joined by rapper, author and podcast host Zuby, who's a huge advocate of financial freedom and opting out of our traditional monetary system altogether. So, Zuby, was this a good moment for Liz Truss to have vowed to protect notes and coins if she becomes Prime Minister?
Hey, Dan. Yeah, I think that's a positive thing for her to say. I think that after the last couple of years, people are increasingly worried about increased centralized control, loss of privacy and things like that. People are concerned about the talk of central bank digital currencies. People have seen what's happened in other countries. You mentioned China and Canada, two very different countries, but both cases in which people have been able to have their own money seized. We have to remember this is their own money. And so I think it's good for her to give some reassurance that that is not the way that the UK is trending.
Zuby, it's so fascinating, isn't it? Lots of, I would describe them as quite woke companies actually do ban the use of cash throughout the UK even today.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that's silly. I mean, that's an individual business decision that can be made, just like there are cash-only businesses. I mean, personally, I'm happy to take both cash and cards or however else someone wants to pay me. I mean, those are individual choices, but as we've discovered, and as we've talked about many times, there's a difference between a choice and a mandate. So if an individual private business or company or entrepreneur decides that the way they want to be paid is just in cash or just via card or just via Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, whatever it is, maybe they want to be paid in beads or salt or seashells, that is their personal choice. However, if it was made mandatory, if cash was abolished entirely, then that opens the pathway for increased centralization, increased surveillance, and increased control, which I think people rightly should be concerned about.
Well, yeah, totally, Zubi, because I wouldn't have thought this was a big deal previously. I mean, at the start of the pandemic, I thought, oh, this is a great excuse not to have lots of dirty coins in my pocket. But for me, it was seeing the way government wanted to control citizens over the course of the pandemic, and specifically the way that Trudeau was able to use a partly cashless society to throttle the Canadian truckers and effectively stop their protest action. I mean, I know he did a lot of things, didn't he? But actually freezing bank accounts was one way that he did it. And I just thought, no, we don't know what government in the future might try and do. So this is such an important principle to stand up for, and we should actually start trying to use cash more.
Yeah, it's important for people to have that option. Obviously, I myself am a big advocate for Bitcoin specifically because I think it fixes a lot of these problems. But I think also it's important to remember that there are people who are simply more comfortable with using cash. Not everyone has debit cards and credit cards, or if they...
Absolutely, and people who want to actually budget, given we're in this cost of living crisis or cost of lockdown crisis, I call it. So, but just finally, can you just explain why Bitcoin would solve this in your view? Because, of course, Bitcoin is an electronic form of cash, right?
Well, it's entirely decentralized, so it's not controlled by any central bank or centralized authority anywhere in the world. It allows you to transact peer-to-peer without having a middleman, and it also tackles things such as inflation. Bitcoin is limited to 21 million units. It's infinitely divisible, and no more of it is ever going to be made, so you can't just go and print Bitcoin like you can go and print US dollars or British pounds or euros and so on. So I've only got a short moment of time to explain it, but those are some of the core things. It's trustless, it's decentralized, and peer-to-peer with no middleman.
Makes sense. Great stuff. Rapper, author, host of the Real Talk with Zubi podcast. Zubi, thank you so much. We'll speak next week. But it's time now to reveal today's greatest Britain and Union jackass. The superstar panel return for this, of course, Sarah Vine. Who is your greatest Britain nominee tonight?
Mick Lynch.
Greatest Britain?
Oh, God,
really?
no, sorry,
Why?
wrong. Oh, God, this gets me every time. It's lovely Andrew Pearce.
Oh, my new colleague.
My colleague who sits next to me and who's very naughty. I mean, no one knows really how naughty Andrew Pearce is except for me. And one day I should reveal all, but he is divine, and he's going to be joining GB News.
Yes, he's going to have his own show later this year. I'm very excited about it. Very good man. Dominique Samuels, who is your greatest Britain nominee?
My greatest Britain nominee is Thomas O'Halloran, the 87-year-old man who was brutally murdered. Obviously didn't deserve it and sounded like he was a credit to his community, so R.I.P.
Very good choice. Amy Nicole, your nominee.
I would give both of those to my definite backing, but mine is every student who collected their A-level results today, because they should be very proud of themselves. And also the AS students and the T-level students, first ever time that we've had the T-levels.
T-levels?
Technical levels.
Oh.
OK, well, I'm going to go for Thomas O'Halloran. As you know, this story has really shook me over the past 24 hours. As Dominique says, he sounded like such a great human being who didn't deserve to die even in his twilight years in the horrific manner that he did. Union jackass time. No, OK, Sarah, we know who you're going for, right?
No, I've slightly jumped the shark on that one. Yeah, no, Mick Lynch.
Why?
Oh, because he made my daughter cry because she took her 2 hours to go home.
And very soon he might be making a whole load of us cry, right? I get that feeling. Dominique Samuels, your nominee.
Mine is Sadiq Khan, the failed mayor of London, for blaming, the spate of crime that's existing on his watch on the weather.
Yeah, I mean, have a look at this.
It's a fine English tradition.
Afraid this summer we are seeing what we feared, which is an increase in violent crime as there are longer daylight hours, school holidays, heat wave and so forth.
I mean, Dominic, this was just astonishing, wasn't it? This is an actual tragedy, a story that is touching the nation.
And he blames it on the weather. You know, it's really bizarre. He'll stop at nothing to transfer blame to someone else. He's done it with the government, but those excuses have run out. So now he's blaming the sunshine. Very bizarre. I don't think the sun would appreciate that.
No, and he's also very happy to speak out against crimes that
when it suits his political agenda.
Narrative. For example, the case of George Floyd in America. But this is a murder in his backyard of an 87-year-old helpless pensioner, and for that to be his reaction, what
odd.
A
very, very odd. No responsibility.
No. Amy Nicole, your Union Jackass nominee.
Mine is Rishi Sunak for his absolute discrediting of the McDonald's menu and his ignorance and lying over the existence of the breakfast wrap, which we all know actually ceased to exist from 2020.
I know, and come on, you're not a McDonald's fan, are you? I know you think
I'm
we're being
absolutely
harsh with
massive
Sarah
McDonald's
Vine, but
fan.
you're not a
right,
McDonald's fan if you haven't gone to McDonald's in the past 2 years, right?
Yeah, come on. You clearly do not eat McDonald's if you've not been there in 2.5 years, mate.
And I mean, I don't want to, I don't want the horrible little GP man who was on earlier, who referred to me as slightly overweight. But if you, some would say he was being very kind. But
no, why?
I know what's on the McDonald's menu week by week.
Yeah.
You know, we live by this as Brits, don't we?
Yes, we do.
And the breakfast wrap has not been there for 2
But I'm glad it's
years.
getting the publicity it deserves.
Maybe they'll bring it back.
Well, I want
Bring it
it
back.
back. I want it back. It's my favourite item on the McDonald's breakfast menu.
Sorely missed.
But look, I'm going to go for Mick Lynch because I think this man is wanting to wreak destruction on this country. He is going for a winter of discontent. It's very dangerous. So Sarah Vine wins Union Jackass tonight. Sarah Vine, Dominique Samuels, Amy Nicole, my superstar panel. Thank you so much. I'm back Monday at 9 p.m. Have a great weekend. Good night.
Hello again, Aidan McGivern here with the latest forecast from the Met Office. Showers for many over the next 24 hours, widely across the UK overnight, and then clear spells away from the showers and turning drier across southern areas by early Friday. Now, a weather front is currently crossing the UK. That's brought cloud and some rain to places during the day, and well, that does tend to sink southeast overnight. So rain increasingly turning showery as it pushes into the Midlands, East Anglia, southern England through the night time. Clear spells to the north behind the rain, but further showers into central and western Scotland as well as Northern Ireland. Breeze picking up here, but away from the breeze, single figures in some sheltered parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England overnight, whilst it stays relatively mild in the southeast. 17 Celsius here first thing, but some lively rain about as well, perhaps even a few thunderstorms early on for Cambridgeshire into Norfolk, Suffolk and Essex. They clear away and then, well, by the afternoon, for much of the southern half of the UK, it's sunny spells and light winds, 22 to 26 Celsius. For the northern half of the UK, a cooler feel because here we'll have a breeze, we'll have a bit more cloud, and we will have a scattering of showers. Those showers then ease away during Friday evening, and clear spells are expected for many until around midnight. That's when the next area of rain and the winds strengthen as this rain arrives into western Scotland and Northern Ireland. So coastal gales around western Scotland and a milder night to come in the north, but further south, clear spells away from western coasts and temperatures in some spots down into the single figures. Plenty of sunshine around for the